and they're not behind when they come in. And so that's something that we're extremely passionate about. The second one would be safer bus routes. This is something that as a coalition we're very excited about. Basically, it would be expanded bus hours during midterms and finals weeks. One thing that we want to look at is apartment complexes used to help pay for bus routes that went out to the different apartment complexes. But 2 years ago, they stopped doing it, and now KU funds that fully. And so what we'd like to do is work with those apartment complexes to expand the hours, to ask if they can chip in to help pay for these bus routes. And I would love to see this initiative accomplished by midterms of the upcoming year. Additionally, one thing that I am extremely passionate about is the Career Service Center and enhancing that, and that is a conversation that needs to start immediately once we're elected into office, working with administration to centralize these opportunities, to administratively get everyone on the same page. Once we do that, we are going to be able to foster such a better academic atmosphere for students and give them so many more opportunities and chances to apply their internships, their experiential learning opportunities to their major, and that's really important. We want to make sure that students are getting the most bang for their buck, that they're having a great experience while they're here, and that classes, are not, that the cost of tuition, things like that, are not getting in the way.
So I want to give each of you 30 seconds to follow up because we heard a number of priorities. What's the number one priority? Thomas asked, what is the priority? And we'll go in the same order. Kevin.
All right. Thank you. Well, as a white male that's straight, I think that building a sustainable tradition is something that we all can get around and support. There really isn't any anti-sustainability people. I mean, you'd be a weird person if you didn't like green technology. But what we can do is very feasible. It is very we can do this in a year. It's super cool. Implementing campus gardens, something like that. It's just an idea.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Morgan. Our timers don't do 30 seconds very well, so I'm trying to count it.
Got it.
When we're elected, the very first thing that we will do is fill all of these board and committee spots that have gone unfilled in years past. I kind of have to credit my vice president. She is the vice chair of the Rights Committee and has opened, I think, our entire coalition's eyes to the lack of student rights in some areas on campus. And that's something that needs to be directly addressed immediately, right when we get elected.
And Mackenzie.
So I would say, obviously, filling the boards and committees is the first responsibility of the president and vice presidential candidate. I think that the opportunity with the hiring of the new vice provost for diversity and equity is such a huge opportunity, and Mitchell and I are going to work tirelessly to get the STAR program, student transition and academic readiness, implemented and to start helping students.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Allison.
This past Senate received a dramatically reduced unallocated budget amount to distribute to projects and student group funding. How will you address this issue if it arises again, and how will you ensure fairness and equity among student groups?
And we will have Mackenzie start with this.
Great. One of our initiatives that I have been thinking about, I've been involved with Senate for 3 years since I was a freshman, and one thing that I've always wanted for student groups is the money that they get, they have trouble spending it because it's hard to know. Like, if you get $100 for office supplies, you're probably not going to spend all of that in office supplies if you're a relatively small group. Bus ads are also something that's difficult because if that group doesn't have contact to a graphic designer, someone who can help them, connect them to advertising, it makes it a lot more difficult. And so what we want to do is create a student group that is completely tasked with not only helping student groups through the Student Senate process, but also afterwards. So when they get this money, they can come and make sure that it's getting spent, because I think that was one of the biggest frustrations this year is that every student organization can access the $200 of general funding. We cut it down to $100 this year because of budgetary constraints. But the hardest part for student groups, I think, is spending that when it's not specifically allocated to an event or something like that. So we want to make sure that those students are spending that money, that when they ask for it, that it's being used, because if it's not, then that's $100 more that another student group can't use. And so we want to make sure that our student groups are 100% utilizing the funds that they get from Senate. And
Morgan.
Could you ask the question one more time, please?
Yeah. Sorry, there we go. I was very focused on my Diet Coke.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
I understand.
Sorry. Anyways, This past Senate received a dramatically reduced unallocated budget amount to distribute to projects and student group funding. How will you address this issue if it arises again, and how will you ensure fairness and equity among student groups?
This issue will not arise again. I will make sure of that. I will make sure that this executive staff does not drain the funds before the next executive staff comes in, regardless of who it is. We have been very strict in our budget this year. We have made sure that we haven't overspent intentionally. We have our treasurers, I have to give them credit because they have done such a great job about being so adamant about this and about paying special attention to our budget. I'm proud of the work that has been done, and I think that moving forward, all we can do is make sure that our transition process is clean, is done in the right way, and that we do leave adequate funds for the next executive staff, regardless of who that may be.
Could you
Kevin.
could you also please repeat the question?
Yes, I'm more prepared this time. This past Senate received a dramatically reduced unallocated budget amount to distribute to projects and student group funding. How will you address this issue if it arises again, and how will you ensure fairness and equity among student groups?
Okay. As Crimson and True, my running mate Sarah Neese has been part of finance for a couple of years, since freshman year, 3 years, and she handles most of this. I'm student rights chair, but what my 2 cents on this is, every student deserves at least a share in our unallocated amount of money, and if we have to find ways to create systems that there's checks and balances, that sometimes that some people we have to compromise, that they can't get the amount of money that they want, then we'll have to go that way, and that's all I got.
Our next question comes from Kaylin.
Recently, the Senate fought to get rid of the $25 athletic fee and proposed some rather harsh budget cuts to the SUA. What fees does your coalition plan to adjust for students?
Morgan, you'll get the first crack at this.
To be so honest, I think that this year has been a great indicator of the fact that things change dramatically over the course of a year. At this point in time, I don't feel comfortable saying necessarily which fees will be adjusted. I can say at this point in time, in terms of our platforms, we are not anticipating an increase in student fees to complete these platforms. Other than that, it really depends on kind of how all of these campus entities come to the table, what they bring to the table in terms of fee review and their pitch and their true desire for, funding increases, if that's what they may be.
Kevin, you're next.
Well, we actually talked to the athletics recently, and we came to the conclusion, as all 3 of us, that we didn't have proper communication between us and athletics. That being said, that SUA actually had great communication because they're across the hall from us, which, of course. And the thing is, sometimes student senators get a little gung-ho on saving people's money. And I'm totally for that. I think we should be as efficient as possible. But sometimes we have to consider the organizations that we are representing, that sometimes if we want T at 3, or if we want to have competitive teams, then we're going to have to shell out the cash. And honestly, I'm all for that.
Could you repeat the question?
The question was, recently the Senate fought to get rid of the $25 athletic fee and proposed harsh budget cuts to the SUA. What fees does your coalition plan to adjust for students?
Again, it's early to say what fees we plan on adjusting, just because there's so many things that can happen over the course of a year. I will say that I'm so confident in all of the Jayhawkers on our slate that they will evaluate fees based off of the impact that it will have on students and students in their student experience, which is important. We have a very good mix on our coalition of there's very 2 distinct personality types on Senate. I think there's the people who want to slash everything and cut it, and then there's kind of the people that hug every single fee and would like every fee to be $500 and be able to do whatever they'd like with it. I can say being focused on the student experience that I think SUA is critical to it. When students feel more connected to our campus, they're more likely to stay in school. They're